And the stragglers will fill in later. We know more will come. Welcome all so very much. I hate to interrupt because it's much more fun to socialize. And the secret to this is that you all sit between, and I stand between you and a reception. So the sooner we start, the faster we get to receive. But welcome so very much. My name is Mitchell Warren. I am the executive director of an organization called AVAC, and for tonight's purposes, am also the president of the TB Alliance's Stakeholder Association. And we are so pleased to have you all here today. And I know many of you have been here from the beginning 8 or so hours ago in this room, but also the beginning more than 20 years ago in thinking about what it meant to be a stakeholder in the search to end TB, and we're going to talk about that today. But first, before I get fully started, I want to introduce you to the TB Alliance and to our work together through this video. So welcome to this Stakeholder Association meeting. Welcome you tonight to this Stakeholder Association meeting. Are the first time we've had a chance to be in person in 4 years. I had the, I don't know if it's the honor or the privilege of being at my first Stakeholder Association as president in October of 2019. And of course, you all know what happened next. But what that video describes, what our work together is to all hold a stake in trying to end TB. And it is really thrilling to be able to be in a room together, to not have to say, can you hear me, or you're on mute, or good morning, good evening, good afternoon, although I do want to welcome those people who are joining us virtually because we have made this a hybrid event. But it is really exciting to actually be able to do something in person here at the Union Conference and at the Stakeholder Association. It is a hybrid meeting. We know you've been through lots of presentations already today. We want to keep this as active, and we're going to get soon to a conversation with a phenomenal panel. Want to encourage people both online to put their questions in, as well as those in the room to use the QR code, now the most common way to communicate with other human beings, which is a little scary, to put in your questions as we go throughout the course of the evening. We are going to really try to keep to time because we want to make sure we have time as a community to be together and have a reception. As I said, my name is Mitchell Warren, and my full-time job is to work at AVAC, an organization that focuses primarily on HIV, but also a number of other issues that are related, including TB. And I was struck throughout the course of today about the old saying from Mark Twain, history may not repeat itself, but it rhymes a lot. And I think the same of pathogens. They may not repeat themselves, but they rhyme a lot. And when I think about the messages throughout the entire day, from the first session this morning about vaccines through diagnostics and now to treatment, is both the wonder of science and the challenge of translating that science into people's lives. And we spent the whole day in the New Tools Summit really thinking about R&D, and I'm thrilled really to be at the end of that day, not just because it's the end of the day, but the end of the day in this session to talk about the progress that the TB Alliance and partners from all over the world have been able to achieve in collaboration and in partnership, two words that happen over and over again. If you were here this morning, there was a great presentation from Ann Ginsberg from the Gates Foundation describing some of the opportunities and gaps in TB vaccine development. And it rhymed for me as someone who thinks about HIV vaccines, about HIV prevention, about TB treatment. And one of the things that was so striking is the need to think about the second, you thought R&D only had one D, right? I want you at least for the next hour and a half, and I hope leaving this room for the rest of your week here at the Union Conference and always to think about R&D and D. We spend so much time thinking about R&D, research and development of new tools. That's what today was about. But if we don't deliver them, they don't really matter, because none of us are doing this work for scientific journal publications. We're not doing this work to get an FDA license or a regulatory license from any other country. Those are milestones to getting products to people. And that's really been a turning point for the TB Alliance. Many of you will know, and the Stakeholder Association really from the beginning of the TB Alliance as part of the Alliance's work was about research and development. Happily, just before we last gathered in person in 2019, we had the great news of Pritomanid, one of the newest treatments approved right before that conference. And although we all went into lockdown, TB Alliance got to work with partners all over the world because getting that approval was just a beginning. And it's often said it's not the beginning of the end, it's the end of the beginning, because the real work is delivery. And so today you're going to hear not only about where we are in the pipeline collectively, as you just heard in the last working group, but to think about not only what is in development, but what is next to make sure that the wonders of science, that we do better, that we do faster, and we do with equity what, frankly, we didn't do with COVID vaccines, and what we failed to do with most global health technologies. How do we make sure they reach the people to have impact? And that's why I'm so thrilled to have you all here today to engage in a conversation with all of us, because going forward, we all have a stake in figuring out how to support the R&D and D, the research and development and delivery. And with that, I'm going to show you the Stakeholder Association membership, which is quite vast. It includes civil society, activists and advocates, but researchers, product developers, public sector, private sector donors, because it takes all of us to do the work that needs to get done. So the good news, the first one is done. I'm going to turn this over to Mel Spiegelman, who you all know and you heard preside just a little while ago in the working group updates, to provide a quick update on the state of the TB Alliance. And I'm going to do all these with quick introductions now because we're not going to spend time later. He's then going to turn it over to Eugene Sen, who leads R&D and the Senior Vice President for Research and Development at the TB Alliance, to give you a TB Alliance R&D update. We'll then turn very quickly to you heard the very quickly, right, everybody? To Sandeep Juneja, also from the Alliance, who leads the market access work, which is really picking up the baton and making Pritomanid and as part of a regimen possible. And then we're going to transition into a great panel discussion, because at the end of the day, it's what happens at the country level, at the clinic level, at the community level that you'll hear from the panelists listed there. So with that, it gives me great pleasure to turn it over to Mel.
Great. Mitchell, thank you so much. And thanks to all of you for bearing with this full day. I think a noble experiment in trying to crowd a hell of a lot of stuff from different areas into one day. It's really great to finally be together in person, as Mitchell alluded to, after so many years of Zooming and being stuck. There's a certain chemistry and productivity that just can't be accomplished remotely, and really appreciate that even from the work today. I'm going to try to give just a brief overview of the TB Alliance, especially over the past year. But first, when I looked at the attendee list, and especially a lot of the people who are Zooming in, a lot of people I didn't recognize, which was great. And so what I wanted to start with was actually to give you a little bit of a longer-term view on what we've been doing at the Alliance over the years. And which button am I pressing? That one, I guess. Okay, so if, you know, our focus, as Mitchell said, from day one, has really been on the discovery and development of new R&D therapeutics. But certainly, most recently, the delivery of improved TB therapeutics has really risen to the fore after we get past, so to speak, the first two steps of actually having something to deliver. But I think if we look back, then some of the major just accomplishments of what we've been able to do, I think, in the TB world, is to really revolutionize the treatment of drug-resistant TB, and you'll be seeing, you've already heard a lot about that and be seeing more about that. Also, we're not going to talk today about the improvement of the treatments for child TB, drug-sensitive TB, that we did back before the COVID pandemic. I think really importantly, and today was fantastic in terms of that, when we got started, everybody was talking about a new drug for TB, including the TB Alliance. That was the whole framework of how everybody was thinking. And then with a lot of pushback, we then changed that dialogue to talking about treatments and regimens for TB, that was what it was going to take. And finally, that stuck. And I think as everybody has seen today, that's the focus now of where everybody is looking at, is what are the new treatment paradigms? And it gets to delivery. You don't deliver a drug. You deliver the whole treatment, and that's what we have to focus on from step one almost in terms of defining that. And obviously, again, for those of you who were at the last session, when we first started out, the global pipeline would have consisted of about 2 players, listing of about 4 projects, perhaps. And you saw what we had to go through in over an hour, to try to get the global pipeline just presented. And that's an amazing change. And I think the stimulation of that has really been phenomenally. And last but not least, what also Mitchell just alluded to is the mobilization of global partnerships all around the world, which has been part and parcel of what has been so critical. But having said that, let's now turn to the more important aspect of what are we going to do in the future? Because the past is, you know, nice, but in a way not that relevant. The future is what we really need to focus on. And we really are at a crucial inflection point where we really need now a really bold vision for simplifying TB treatment and making it more deliverable, more easily deliverable on a global basis. And based on the recent technological advances, we now have set even much more aggressive goals for the TB Alliance moving forward. We now can see a path forward to potentially treating latent TB in 1 day of diagnosis and treatment, and a shorter time period of 1 month for active TB. And we've been in active discussions around this with a wide variety of partners, most notably the Gates Foundation. And how are we going to, how do we propose to attack this? Because it's a pretty, you know, kind of outlandish goal to say that. And I think the path to doing this is really revolves around combining more effective and safer novel compounds. So we still need to press ahead on getting much more effective and safer compounds than what we have today even. Couple that with advances in formulation science, and we'll go into that a little bit later, and especially with long-acting injectables. And couple that with a much deeper understanding and exploitation of the human immune system to be able to invoke the sort of advances that have been made in immunological approaches for other diseases like cancer and employ those for infectious diseases and specifically TB. So that is really the mechanistic way that we're beginning to look at, or we have started to look at, for how to reach these sort of really, I would say, audacious goals. And in that process—
Sorry, 1 minute warning.
Oh, nope. It's going to— Okay, and in that process, we're going to obviously need to invoke making sure on the delivery end that no person, no matter what, is left behind. Okay, so now let me go through 90% of the presentation in the 1 minute. So partnerships. You know, here is a brief outline of the major partnerships that we have globally. And these have been not only instrumental, but a sine qua non. We would never have gotten to where we are, and the field would never have gotten to where it is without these sort of partnerships. And these are only going to grow. They're not going to get less. That certainly is both a prediction and a hope. The last real topic that I wanted to touch to inform everybody is that at the Alliance we have been undergoing a strategic review over the course of this past year that is still continuing, but that will hopefully end towards the beginning of next year probably. And we feel it's really been an inflection point for the TB Alliance and for both our immediate and longer term operations. So we've been carrying out this process of really a strategic review to evaluate how we as an organization can respond to key challenges in the field, refine our vision and mission, identify priorities for engagement in the coming critical years, and be adaptable to a changing world. And so therefore, as you see here, we are identifying priority areas of engagement that I will go into, and we certainly hope, and why we've been going through this, we're in a globally changing environment and we need to adapt. There's no question about that, and we hope with that adaptation we'll become even more effective, sustainable, and a relevant organization to contribute even greater in the years to come. Specifically on the process of where we have come so far, and we have already, and we will be including a lot of people in this room and online in this process. There really are three strategic pillars. Mitchell touched on this. There are three strategic pillars that we really have to focus on: the discovery, the development, and the delivery. I'm not going to take a lot of time now to go through these. The slides will be available, but we've color-coded. So this is a combination of the focus that we've had in the past, coupled with new areas that we will either markedly improve upon and focus even greater resources on, coupled with those that we have in the past. So I'll just take the example in the discovery space, the conventional small molecules, we've always focused on those. We will continue to work very heavily in the small molecule space, but we need to do much more in the immunotherapeutic space, in the artificial intelligence space, and in working with long-acting injectables in order to achieve this vision. And similarly, I won't go through it because you'll hear more about it in the subsequent presentations from Eugene and Sandeep and then from the panel, but we need to clearly do that in the areas of both clinical development and also in delivery, which clearly, as Mitchell said, if we're not successful in delivery, we should not have even embarked on day one of what we're trying to do. So with that, let me just finish up and thank our donors, whom clearly This is a very difficult world these days in terms of marshaling the resources to do what we do and what so many other organizations do in this area. And without our multiplicity of donors, none of this could have been accomplished. So we clearly, and the field, I think, is clearly indebted to our donors for the tremendous job that they've done. With that, let me now turn it over to Eugene, our head of R&D, to walk you through some of the advances there.
Thanks, Mel. My goal is to avoid Roxana coming up to give me the 1-minute warning. Our work in R&D rests on 4 foundational elements. And you've heard these words already from Mel and Mitchell. We innovate through science. We translate these innovations to better treatments for people with TB. We demonstrate their utility, their quality, and their value through clinical trials and regulatory approvals. And we collaborate with many, many stakeholders who represent the TB community. The last time this group met in person, as has been mentioned, 4 years ago, the NICS trial had just shown that B-PAL cured most people with the most resistant forms of TB. But it was not an easy regimen to take, owing to the high dose of linezolid used in the trial. And so we then looked for a more tolerable but no less efficacious linezolid dose, which produced the results shown on this slide and published in the New England Journal. That was the XENIX trial, where all 4 dosing regimens, it's kind of an echo, had a high success rate, but the 600 milligram linezolid regimens were much better tolerated, with only about 13% requiring dose modifications, as opposed to about 2/3 in NICS. A third important trial of B-PAL, conducted by MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières, demonstrated that B-PAL-based regimens in a controlled trial outperformed the standard of care a WHO recommended for drug-resistant TB. These 3 trials, taken together, formed the basis for the 2022 WHO guidelines for drug-resistant TB, recommending B-PAL with or without moxifloxacin as the new standard of care for almost all forms of drug-resistant TB. If you think about it, to get from treatments involving as many as 8 or 9 drugs taken for as long as 2 years to a regimen of 3 to 4 drugs orally taken for only 6 months, that has been described in a New England Journal article editorial as one of the defining achievements of the TB research community in this century. We're only at the beginning of the century here, so we have more room. And there is clearly more work to be done. As you know, most infectious diseases can be cured in days to weeks, and some actually in a day. And that, as you heard from Mel, is what we are working towards. Now, I would like to tell you now about a promising drug in our pipeline that you may have heard about earlier that will move us closer to these goals, and that is a drug called TBAJ-876. TBAJ-876, or 876 from now on, is what we call a next-generation diaryl quinoline, resulting from chemical modifications shown in yellow to the bedaquiline molecule. These changes resulted in stronger potency against TB and less toxicity in preclinical studies, which we expect will translate into shorter treatment duration and a safer clinical profile. We also see a potential for 876 to be a long-acting injectable drug, but I'll come back to that. On Thursday, my colleagues Todd Black and Becky Berry will present oral presentations at the oral abstract sessions. Advances in TB have been greatly facilitated by what we have learned from mouse models of TB. These experiments explore different treatment regimens, shown on the left column, given for various durations, shown in the top row. A green box means that that regimen, given for that duration, cured all mice in that group of their tuberculosis. So what this experiment tells us is that higher doses of 876 lead to faster cures, and that 876 doses are at least 8 times more potent than bedaquiline, confirming what we see in the laboratory. Our longtime collaborator at Johns Hopkins University, Eric Nuremberger, will give an oral presentation on these data on Thursday as well. So with these promising data preclinically, we advanced 876 into phase 1 studies in humans and have completed a 3-part phase 1 study exploring single doses, multiple doses, food effect, and the evaluation of a tablet for use in phase 2 studies. My colleague Tony Lombardi will be presenting these data at an oral presentation on Thursday. That's my last advertisement. Subsequently, we then translated our preclinical work and our phase 1 data into a range of doses to test in our phase 2 study, specifically to ensure that the low dose of 25 milligrams on the left would be sufficiently efficacious and that the high dose of 100 milligrams would be sufficiently safe. And here's that study. We have just begun this study. I think we actually have patients enrolled now, thanks to the clinical team. This study will enroll 300 participants with newly diagnosed drug-sensitive TB, randomized to one of 5 arms and stratified by disease severity and geography. Let me walk you through this. One arm is the HRZE control arm. Oops, sorry. I don't know how to go backwards, but that's the bottom arm. The second arm is BPAL for 6 months. The remaining 3 arms represent the 3 876 doses that we're testing in combination with bertomimir and linezolid for 8 weeks, followed by another 7 weeks of isoniazid and rifampin. At week 15, they will either stop treatment or continue with HR based on the results of the week 8 midget test, which looks for live TB. If the midget is negative, the patient will stop therapy and be followed. And if the midget is positive, patients will continue with isoniazid and rifampin to complete a 6-month course. And of course, all patients will be followed for outcomes at 26 and 52 weeks after completion of therapy. So what do we expect to learn from this study? First, we will learn about the optimal dose of 876 that will be a candidate to advance into phase 3 studies. We will also be able to directly compare 876 at various doses with bedaquiline as they share a common companion regimen backbone. We will also learn about the potential for an 876 bertomimir linezolid regimen to be a treatment regimen shorter than 4 months. We'll learn about how BPAL performs in drug-sensitive TB relative to the standard of care, and also we'll also be able to compare it to our experience with BPAL in drug-resistant TB. And of course, we'll be able to compare all groups at the primary and multiple secondary endpoints. Finally, 876, as I mentioned earlier, is a promising candidate for long-acting injectables. There's great interest in developing LAIs for treating both active and latent TB, which could greatly simplify treatment, as has been shown recently with Cabenuva for HIV, which is an every 2-month injection of cabotegravir and rilpivirine. There's been much progress in formulation technology that makes this approach feasible for drugs with the right characteristics, and 876 fits the bill in many of these respects. Particularly for latent TB, which we know already can be successfully treated by a single agent, a single injection may be achievable with 876. So to summarize, a lot of progress, a lot of work ahead of us, and a lot to look forward to. And we would like to express our sincerest gratitude to those affected by DB who participated in our trials, our research and consortia partners, funders, and all of our collaborators. Thank you. I'd like to introduce Sandeep Juneja, Head of Market Access.
Thank you, Eugene. And welcome everyone once again to our Stakeholders Association meeting. It's great to see you again in person after such a long time. What I'll try to do is compress the last 4 years of progress into 10 minutes and hopefully still make sense. So it'll go fast. But that's the theme at TB Alliance these days. We've got to work fast to get the treatments to people who need them. And in these last 4 years that we haven't met in person, we have seen excellent progress in terms of creating access to the BPAL-M treatment that Eugene and Mel spoke about. And today I'd like to share that with you, where we are currently and what our plans next for the BPAL and BPAL regimen, and for a BPAL and BPAL-M regimen, and for the future treatments. So to start with, I'd like to share with you where we are right now. So right after, so it's been about a year since the guidelines that Eugene spoke about came out. And at this time, we are cumulatively at 70 countries ordering Pretominid for an equivalent of 40,000 patients. This is very exciting news for us. When we began working on bedaquiline Pretominid linezolid or BPAL, we didn't know what will be the pace. We were doing something very, very new. This number of 40,000 may appear small by itself, but if you consider that in context of the fact that only about 150,000 people get treatment to DRTB every year, that is significant in such a short time. And additionally, comparing that with new TB treatments that have been introduced in the last decade, this volume in 4 or 5 years from initial stringent regulatory approval is 4 or 5 times higher. So, in fact, such excitement has rarely been seen for innovation in the global health space that I'm aware of, and especially TB. So this is the guidelines that Eugene spoke about and I spoke about earlier. Many of you would be aware of the guidelines recommend BPAL and BPAL-M as the new standard of care for first-line use in MDR-TB. Additionally, there was an information note from Global Fund recommending to countries to switch to BPAL and BPAL-M. Now, these are very strong endorsements for the regimen, and they have created an excellent environment for adoption and rollout of BPAL in the countries. And apart from those recommendations and solid clinical evidence that Eugene spoke about from trials, there's also compelling pricing of Pretominid, and hence the BPAL regimen that has led to this rapid uptake that I spoke about earlier. And this stems from TB Alliance's very conscious and well thought out commercial strategy. That strategy resulted in a very low starting price of Pretominid, which was a key reason for initial excitement, apart from all the evidence. And that strategy is bringing multiple manufacturers to the market for Pretominid. That will increase supply options, reduce risk, and foster generic competition. And that's the best and the most sustainable way to bring pricing down. In fact, we are announcing that McLeod's, our second manufacturer, who's followed Viatris, has begun making supplies. And I'd like to emphasize that our focus with manufacturers is not only on cost and price, but it's also about quality. Our manufacturers are required to adhere to stringent regulatory standards, WHO pre-qualification, but they are also required to comply with stewardship requirements that are expected in the field of infectious diseases. That means they cannot promote, they cannot sell, they cannot market and distribute Pretominid in any indication outside of what's approved or outside of WHO guidelines. The low price of Pretominid and BPAL, coupled with high success rates and low duration, means much lower health systems costs. And that gives BPAL a very strong value proposition. We have done several studies in diverse geographic settings and come up with the same conclusion. BPAL is highly cost-saving, it's highly cost-effective, And it has very high feasibility of implementation in low and middle income countries. To give you a perspective of potential global impact beyond the country studies that we have done, I'd like to share with you results of an analysis that we did along with WHO, Stop TB Partnership, and Global Fund to ascertain if you were to switch everyone to BPAL today, how much would the global health community save? And that number was $740 million, not over the lifetime of the drug, but every year. So imagine $750 million saved every year just by one intervention if you move fast. And savings on per patient basis are 40 to 90%. DALIs averted would be more than 50%. And that is why most countries have found it a complete no-brainer to start using BPAL. In fact, countries that are not implementing BPAL among the highest burden countries, unless they have a regulatory reason or a legislative reason, are an exception rather than the rule. Okay, that's when I'm speaking about countries that are moving. Okay, here it is. So when we set out to work on BPAL access, we knew that we had a game-changing treatment, but we were also aware that the road to access is long and arduous, and the process involves many steps. And in the past, it has taken as much as 9 years. So with that in mind, and keeping the life-saving nature of BPAL and the need for speed, we worked deliberately to ensure many access activities, especially those that are in our control or that we influence, happen in parallel. And that has allowed us to enable access within 3 years, saving as much as 6 years in the process. And here's an example of that proactive approach and attitude we have taken to access. One example is pricing. I mentioned earlier that our commercialization strategy resulted in a low price to start with, a historically low price for a new drug to start with. However, that was based on a very narrow and limited indication of pre-XDR TB, which was about applicable in 10 or 12,000 patients. But we still got a good price through our negotiations. But when it became clear to us that WHO guidelines will recommend a much wider use in MDR TB for BPAL and Pretomanid, we set about finding a way to bring that price down. So we collaborated with another nonprofit called MedAccess that specializes in market shaping and volume guarantees, and Viatris to stimulate a price reduction. And we got a significant price reduction stitched up right before the WHO guidelines and announced in a couple of days after WHO guidelines. So that is the kind of speed and proactivity which we think we owe to the people for whom we are developing these products. Another example, and this is not the end, by the way. We are going to continue to work on pushing costs down and hence prices down, and we are pretty sure that with more suppliers, expanded use of Pretomanid, that's going to happen. So another example of proactivity and is early country engagement. Back in 2018-19, when we were certain about the viability of BPAL as a treatment, we began engaging a wide range of countries to understand what it will take to implement BPAL in those settings. And in that process, we identified several potential early adopter countries. And once WHO's initial guidelines about using BPAL in limited settings were announced, we engaged with those countries and got going with early implementation research of BPAL. And that happened right during COVID, as Michelle said, that couldn't have been the worst time, but because we found the right countries and engaged with them, we could get going. We launched during COVID our flagship access project called LIFT-TB that supported implementation studies in 7 countries. And though we went with a much higher number of countries for implementation, usually one would go with a couple of countries or so, that approach allowed us to learn a lot about realities of implementing a new treatment in diverse settings, and that's paying off now. Now, having learned how to do this in so many different countries, we are able to translate that experience into many more different countries. Along with LIFT-TB, we have carried out...
1-minute warning.
Say again?
1 minute warning.
I was waiting to earn that. So, okay, I'll speed up. So along with LiftTB, we have carried out such projects in 12 or 13 countries of the top 20 high MDR burden countries, and are set to expand that work to the next set of countries. There are several abstracts from LiftTB that are being presented at this conference. There is one that's happening tomorrow, which brings together results from 5 countries. I encourage you to have a look at that. This work obviously wouldn't have been possible without our partners, and we have set about deliberately building a network of partners. Not one partner can do this, unfortunately. So we have a few international partners, but many local partners. And we've also taken it upon ourselves during the course of our work to build local capacity among technical assistance providers. One group I'd like to specifically point out is our community partners. Over the course of LiftTB, we began working in the communities, and then we have rapidly expanded that work, and it's been heartening how much our community partners, through a project that we launched in collaboration with Stop TB Partnership called Fast Track the Cure, has helped our work and informed our work. Last slide. What we have learned and what are we going to do next is that access planning begins early. It begins during R&D. We've learned that it's crucial for PDPs to take charge of access to their products and be proactive. We were told early on when I began working at the Alliance 5 years ago, your job is to develop the product, forget about access. If we had let that go, you wouldn't have seen those people on treatment today, not as many, maybe a fraction. PDP's lack of commercial motive places them uniquely among with countries, with communities, with global health stakeholders such as WHO, Stop TB, Global Fund, and many others, to really advocate and champion the work of access for the products they develop. And they're well placed to develop local capacity. They're small by definition. They've got to work through others, and hence they end up capacitating others in the field. That's very, very important, and PDPs need to take that on. And finally, again, we are small, so we've got to go where the winds are. And one thing that we learned is countries with strong program leaderships bring innovations to their patients faster. So you've got to be choosy about which countries that you work with, where you have a better chance of treatment going, and the rest will follow. So this is so that we don't spin our wheels. Our immediate next steps are to expand this work on BPAL access to further countries to support the UN HLM targets, foster experience sharing from early adopter countries to others, so a peer-to-peer learning approach, planning for improved formulations that Eugene spoke about, and a few others that we'll speak when there is further opportunities which are in the pipeline, and already planning for doing preliminary work for 876. So these are all underway, and happy to speak in the break if anyone is interested about some of this. Pivoting now quickly, now I've got new lease of time to the panel. So you've heard it from TB Alliance, what it took to implement and launch Pritominid and BPAL. But really very useful insights can come from countries that have been actually in the middle of this implementation and doing all the hard work. So we put together a very interesting panel from key countries that have been really the trailblazers in BPAL implementation. That is Ukraine, Pakistan, Indonesia, South Africa, and Brazil. And I'd like to invite them here to come up on the panel. For moderating the panel, we have 2 community representatives, Oksana Ruksinianu and Priyanka Iyer. Thank you so much for really helping us with this panel. Please join us here, and I'd give a quick word of introduction. Oksana is the Vice President of SMIT Moldova Patients Association. Oksana is herself an MDR TB survivor and a TB civil society leader. And Priyanka is a member of Global Fund Advocates Network. Most recently, she was seen in action as a co-leader of the Civil Society Engagement Task Force in the TB high-level meeting in September. Thank you once again, and over to you.
Good afternoon, dear participants. I'm very honored and pleased to be here, and I would really appreciate being here on behalf of community representatives. As already mentioned, being an MDR-TB survivor with 36 months of treatment with drug-susceptible drugs for 1 year because there were no option. The time I was diagnosed with MDR-TB for the drugs, so I followed 12 months with first-line drugs, then another 2 years, 24 months with second-line drugs to get me here to be treated and to be here on behalf of community saying how crucial this moment is. Having 6 months here, an efficient treatment regimen for patients is extremely important. This is what we fight it here in our country back now 10 years ago when there were no options, limited capacity to unlimited pipeline, and seeing today this generous pipeline when there is no, even 1 hour is not enough to present the potential of new drugs and new treatment regimens for patients. It's extremely critical and extremely emotional for all of us because we see that there are people behind who are lacking access, even having the possibility to access treatment and regimens in a shorter formulation. This is a pity it's not yet available global-wide. So I think it's extremely important from the perspective of community to be here and speak that engaging in community engagement programs within clinical trials, we can see, and I think we can mention Moldova as one of a good country because less than in 18 months since the results of the BPAL regimen have been recommended by WHO, we are now in our country having the potential already to revise the guidelines and to introduce the BPAL-M regimen in the country starting with January. So this is another point to approach in promoting BPAL regimens and shorter BPAL regimen, engaging community activists in the country, not just posing all this burden of working with policy developers in the country on behalf of scientists, of NTP program managers. So I would like to give a word for the introduction for Priyanka to say a few, and then we will introduce our panelists.
Thank you. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Oksana. My name is Priyanka, and before I give an introduction to myself, I just want to say that there was another co-moderator who was supposed to be here, Jojin, who was supposed to take this place but could not make it due to visa issues, and it is highly regrettable that access at every step continues to be a huge barrier, be it access to spaces like this because of visa issues, or be it access to quality care and diagnostics. And I'm really happy to be a co-moderator, but I do miss the presence of my friend Jojin, who could have been here. And it's very important to have discussions like this. And I'm thankful to TB Alliance to give me this chance to be a co-moderator. My name is Priyanka, and I am from India. And I just want to say that the BPAL treatment regimen offers us an incredible chance to bring change. It's shorter, it's more effective, and it's about time we get excited about it. We are here to make sure that this isn't just another conversation, but a call to action. Let's rally behind the implementation of the BPAL regimen. And most importantly, let's cut through the noise and focus on what really matters, the well-being of people who are affected by TB. To my esteemed panelists here, and also all my partners here, I just want to say that as partners, as advocates, as activists, we are not here to just be a part of the rhetoric, but in fact, we are here for action. And we have to and we must work together to ensure that the BPAL regimen is accessible to all who need it. This is our chance to create a world where TB is no longer a threat. And with that, I will pass it on to Oksana to invite our panelists.
Thank you. Thank you, Priyanka. I would gladly invite our panelists here to come. Please, our Member of Parliament of Ukraine, Mrs. Lada Bulach, please come and join us for a discussion. Lada Bulach is a Member of Parliament, Committee of Epidemic Security, HIV and Socially Dangerous Diseases in Ukraine. So the next panelist is Abdul Ghafoor, the MDR-TB advisor, National TB Program, Ministry of Health of Pakistan. Please join us for a discussion. The next panelist is Dr. Siti Nadia Tarmizi, Director of Communication Bureau, Ministry of Health, Indonesia. Please. Fernanda Doghorn, National TB Program, Ministry of Health of South Africa. Please join us. And our last but not the least, most important panelist, Norbert Njeka, Chief Director, TB Control and Management, National Department of Health of South Africa. Dear panelists, it's a great honor to see you because you are the first now to show us the experience of the countries, and we are happy here to see how the scientific results are already translated at the country level. We are eager to know what are the challenges, what are the progresses you are making, and what's the key words and key messages for our auditoria here to be shared. We will start first with our MP, Honorable Lada Bulach from Ukraine. We now appreciate the efforts done by Ukraine in this difficult situation. The implementation of all innovative TB legislation in the country recalls and needs political commitment. And this is done because we see the results in your country. As one of the leaders in implemented BPAL regimen in Ukraine, how can you explain the experience of you in implementing and adjusting the guidelines in Ukraine? And as understanding the BPAL regimen as one of approach of multicentric, people-centered care, how will you explain the consolidation and the structural approach in building an understandable and affordable, accessible treatment for TB patients in Ukraine?
Thank you. Thank you for inviting. Thank you for invited, and thank you for the question. I have prepared for it, so I try to have a little speech, if you don't mind. Ukraine belongs to 18 high priority countries of the WHO as a country with a high prevalence of drug-resistant tuberculosis. And such a situation requires a multi-sectoral consolidated approach. At the same time, Ukraine is committed to fulfill international obligation to overcome tuberculosis. In particular, the national strategy in the field of combating HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, and viral hepatitis until 2030 has been approved, which corresponds to WHO recommendations as well. And this year, on the initiative of the subcommittee on epidemic safety, which I am the head of, a new TB elimination law was adopted. The law guarantees the right of people with TB to receive access to quality TB services and social support too. It takes into account the needs of vulnerable groups and establish the possibility of involving civil society in the provision of TB services the same. Also, with the support of parliamentarians, important medical reforms have been launched in the field of TB elimination with a wider application of outpatient models. The National TB Program has adopted TB policies and outpatient and standards in accordance with the current WHO guidelines. Ukraine is one of the leaders in implementing, with the support of the WHO, innovative short-term treatment regimens and new drugs, such as Pretamanid, if you know these drugs. The introduction of shorter, more effective and safer treatment regimens contributes to the improvement of the level of care provided to TB patients. It's not possible to introduce innovations in the country without legislative framework and support, which is the main task of parliamentarians when it comes to combating HIV and TB. At the same time, parliamentarians exercise parliamentary control over the activities of ministries related to TB control, and committee hearings on TB control are held. As important except is to ensure proper financing of TB services, including innovative medicines and provision of social services. Parliamentarians adopt the state budget for the healthcare system, so it's important for parliamentarians, representatives of the government, the National TB Program and the public to work together on this issue. While Ukraine continued to demonstrate leadership in the region in implementing innovative approaches to TB eradication, the country faces a number of complex challenges. To overcome these challenges, all world needs to consolidate efforts in connection with the devastating impact of Russia's full-scale armed aggression against Ukraine. Violating international law, Russian attacks have destroyed more than 1,600 medical facilities, 15 of which provide medical care for TB patients. Hundreds of thousands of people have lost their homes. Millions have become refugees. Cities in the war zone have been destroyed, and humanitarian catastrophes is observed. Despite the challenges in connection with the war against Ukraine, we still continue to unite efforts in the field of TB elimination. On behalf of the government and the medical community, we express our gratitude for the support of Ukraine, our health system, and the provision of humanitarian aid. Thanks.
For the next question, I'd like to go to Dr. Ghafoor. Dr. Ghafoor, Pakistan conducted a pilot implementation of 6-month BPAL-M at 4 sites and now has moved on to 12 sites within less than a year. Can you please share the success in preparing for Pakistan's TB regimen change, and especially how it has differed in terms of implementation for other new treatment introductions in the past? And also, if you could reflect on the accelerated timeline and how you plan to continue this accelerated timeline in the future.
Thank you, Priyanka. I mean, we are not here to talk that BPAL is effective. We all know that it is. The thing that I need to share is that it should have been much earlier in my country than right today or in October 2022. And why I'm saying so. Pakistan is a country where MDR-TB, our patients have more than 40% resistance to fluoroquinolone. FQ resistance more than 40% is huge. And we all know that the treatment outcomes of those are, we all know that they are not as good as those who are FQ sensitive. So when the next trial came in, I mean, we were inspired. I mean, we saw something new emerging for our FQ resistant cases, because those were the patients we were losing every day, every part of the year. And then when Xenex study came, we were saying that, well, now these things need to be done. And then there was a need at the country level. And then it was a multi-pronged study approach, Priyanka. It was not like simple Dr. Kapoor saying one thing. Multi-pronged in the sense that we started talking to our international technical partners like TB Alliance, and perhaps Sandeep would bear me out on this, and Asta as well. They had been talking about it for a long time now. I mean, like, it's not 1 year, 2 years, long time, that how to do it, when to do it, how to make it happen. We talked to international technical partners. In the meantime, we talked to the national decision makers, policy makers. We talked to the Ministry of Health, sensitize them what's going on in the next trial, what's going on in the next trial, and what is the hope for our patients in the country. We talked to the DRAP, Drug Regulatory Authority, in the meantime, like all at the same time, not one after the other, because that takes time, that takes months. So we convinced them at least this much, that they would allow Pretominid, they will give a waiver to Pretominid's entry into the country. And then we looked at our country landscape and assessed who is the best implementing partner and MDR-TB in the private sector. So I'm very pleased to share that we have a very effective, very professional association, civil society association, Association for Social Development, which was implementing MDR-TB, managing MDR-TB in 12 districts, 12 PMDT sites of the biggest province of Punjab. So international partners, national partners, ministry, RAP, but there was a big challenge of who? I mean, the pulmonologists. I mean, just experts. I mean, come on, I mean, 1200 milligram of linezolid, no way. I mean, how can that happen? 600 milligram later, okay, but we need an evidence, and then we provided them with the evidence. There is a platform, we call it Strategic Technical Advisory Group, which on one side have government, public health specialists, with pulmonologists, all mixed together. And we successfully convinced them that this is time to do it, get it done in the interest of the patient. And they also knew the risk of the FQ resistant cases in Pakistan. So, I mean, the things were clear. We need, but then, and in the meantime, I mean, forgot one thing, that when we were talking to all these, we put an order for Pretominid. When the WHO said that, well, it is now you can do operational research and soon followed by programmatic management, so we placed an order. And it came in when the support of TB Alliance again agreed to support a pilot in 4 PMDT sites with National TB Control Program and Association for Social Development. It was not only a support, it was a technical guidance. How to do it, what are the tools, how to organize your ADSM. Learning from those 4 sites, we managed to scale up quick. That was fundamental. There's 4 PMDT sites starting there humbly in 120 cases. But I mean, having all the areas in hand, like all the tools in hand, all the ADSM, how to do it, how to put the patients on treatment, how to follow them up, what things need to be prioritized and what has to be kept in mind. That was a great learning for us at the National TB Control Program. And quick we were on our road to implementing, scaling it up to 12 PMDT site. Now that I sit here and talk to you, we have got more than 463 patients on BPAL-M. We have got a treatment outcome of more than 25 patients. It's not a cohort because we started October 22. I'm talking of right now, the results that we have in hand. Of BPAL, I mean, of FQ resistant cases, we have almost 89% success. and of the BPL-M, we have 90% success rate. Against what? Against 65% at one time and 72% other. So can you imagine what the number of patients we saved? By we, I mean the country saved, by the program saved, this intervention saved. So learning this, the plan that we have in future, as Priyanka, you asked about what are we going to do in future, from 1st January onwards, we have more than 85% of our patients on BPAL. For the next 3 years, we will have more than 17,000 patients on BPAL and BPAL-M. This with the Global Fund support, and we have made our financial arrangements like the global support has. So, I mean, my submission is that what we need to do is multi-pronged, simultaneous, fast, like not one by one, but things together in a fast pace, and we can get it done. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, dear panelists. It's a very good and fruitful discussion to understand the challenges, to understand the barriers at the local, national level, and how we overcome, how it's important to work with private mix, which is another important player in the ground, which should be taken into consideration. Our next question will go to Dr. Tarmizi. We know that the Ministry of Health of Indonesia, Mr. Budi Gunadi Sidikin, has recently announced about this decision to speed up the BPAL implementation in the country. So can you please share how we actually plan to transition from the operational research to programmatic implementation, and how the physicians at the national, subnational level are perceiving this change, and how do you think will be the beginning on the starting point of the scaling up the implementation of the BPAL in the country? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Oksana. As I think a National TB Program in Indonesia quite lucky because we have a highest commitment from our minister. So as the reason, the announcement by our Minister Budi to expedite the implementation of the BPAL and BPAL-M in the country, there is a transition from the operational research phase to the programmatic implementation, which we see is a promising developments. After the decision has been made, the progress of BPAL implementation in Indonesia, starting with the operational research from July 2022 up to June 2023, with almost total 106 patients were enrolled. And currently, 15 are still undergoing for the treatment, and 5 withdrew from the program. And the best thing is the treatment outcome of the 86 that currently has been assessed. And from the operational research, we got the impressively almost like 84 patients were cured or complete their treatment, which mean resulting treatment success rate about 97.7%. And the transition from operational research to programmatic BPAL and BPAL-M implementation began in July 2023. We start with 20 patients enrolled with the BPAL and 94 with the BPAL-M. And what we have doing this? Several crucial steps has been taken to facilitate this programmatic transition from operational research to the programmatic implementation by starting inclusion of the BPAL and BPAL-M regimens in the 2023 Health Ministerial Decree. Following this, the decree, the NTP has developed operational handbooks, technical guideline, and revise or any inclusion into other guideline for the BPAL or the BPAL regimen. And the BPAL and BPAL-M starting in 97 PMDT hospital in 4 provinces, which these provinces is high burden drug resistant TB. And addition with that, we are providing such as like a gene expert, LPA, culture and DST laboratories, along with the training initiatives such as a Petromanit and phenotypic DST training for referral laboratories. And we conduct workshop for the health care workers, which reflects a comprehensive infrastructure to support the implementation. And from the operational research, we have like 150 proton minute. And now we are ordering 4,000 more for securing the supplies. So hopefully it can be received soon in the country. The involvement of the committee, of course, is playing a very important role. This is not including the committees itself, but including the TB survivor organization in patient support to emphasize a patient-centered approach, answering holistic care and the support. And of course, lastly, we are mobilizing financial support that available from various sources recruiting in country and from the partners. And regarding how the implementing physician and the drug-resistant patient perceive in this change, we are acknowledge the bringing perception of the physician and patient perceive is a crucial phase for the success of the program. Early phase likely involve of the healthcare providers and the organization from the beginning to adapt the new protocol and the patient experience in shifting in their treatment approach. Of course, feedback and experience during the limited programmatic scale-up in 2023 would have played important input in shaping the perceptions. As the scale-up will be extended to cover 34 provinces in 2024, and we are expecting for a full scale-up of treatment across all the country in 38 provinces to be realized by January 2025. Ongoing feedback and the evaluation would be essential in understanding how to implement BPAL and BPAL's real-world impact for the physician and the patients. However, the success of this ambitious relies not only on meeting the timeline, but also continuous monitoring, evaluation, and adaptation based on the feedback received from the physician, professional organization, and the drug-resistant TB patient itself through all the process. So I think that we can update for the Indonesian situation.
Thank you so much. We have commitment from 2 countries already to scale up the treatment, so we are waiting for January. Thank you.
So as we talk about what is happening, it is also important to talk about what we are looking towards in the future. And with that thought, I want to turn to Dr. Doghon and ask you, can you please share with us the expected timeline of introduction of BPAL-M in Brazil and how this pathway of introduction is going to be different from the previous new TB drugs that we have seen? And also, I wanted to talk to you about how has the civil society played a role in the TB R&D, and how have they helped accelerate the timeline of bringing BPAL-M to the people of Brazil?
So thank you. First of all, I would like to thank you, the organizers, the TB Alliance, for inviting to share the country experience. It's very important for us to be here after 4 years without seeing the people. Brazil are working to a big effort to implement BPAL in the public health system, and we're trying to bring the medicine as soon as possible. That year, the President Lula, they created the National Committee to eliminate tuberculosis and other TB and other social determined disease. This committee have a high compromise for 8 Minister of Health and 8 other ministers to fight against poverty, inequities, social determinations, and racial problems, to help the system, to help the health system, how to improve and to eliminate together the insectoriality of tuberculosis, to eliminate together the disease. We know tuberculosis is the social determined, and the Minister of Health alone, they can't effort to eliminate so fast, because we have a high compromise inside the country to eliminate the disease until 2030. Just a second. So after the new evidence was running about BPAL, we start the process to implement the public health system. So the National Tuberculosis Program start the last year. But we are a bureaucratic country. It's not easy to implement new technologies inside because we have the universal public health system, so this health is a fit and direct and a data of the state. So every technology we have in the public health system, the government have to provide. So they are very strict to analyze it. They have a study, the National Committee to Implement New Technologies, they did studies about efficacy, cost effectiveness, about safety, and how discussed for the public health system this new technology. But now, with the new government, will be possible to accelerate this process. And in the last September, the BPAL, the Pertomanid, was implemented in the public health system. So now the procurement process is ongoing. We are planning to have the medicine in beginning of the next year. We have some difficulties for procurement because the Pertomanid don't have register in our regulatory agency, but now we are working with PAHO and with GDF to have as soon as possible the medicine inside the country. When you have the medicine inside the public health system, it's not so difficult to implement this new technology because we have a very close contact to the health facility. It's almost 300 health facilities treating DRTB inside the country, and we send the medicine direct to this health facility. So now we are planning the training for the doctor, the training for the health professional in general to accelerate this incorporation when the medicine is feasible inside the country. So about the civil society, I'd like to highlight we have a very difficult time during the past years. The old government, they canceled our official communication we have in the past with the civil society, with the academy. So, of course, I'm a technician. I work with National Tuberculosis Program. So I talk with civil society, I talk with academy, but we don't have the official space for that. It's the informal communication. But now, if this new government is prioritizing this regulatory issue, for us it's very important this communication, this space to work with civil society and academy and others stakeholders inside the country to think about the political compromising, to think about the public policies, to implement the new public policies, planning and monitoring public policies, because civil society have a very, very important, not just to monitoring the process, but just help us to construct a good public health system, how civil society wants, because the more important are what they need, not what the government wants. And other issue that civil society help us a lot is the communication with the parliamentarian. We know we need more financing to end TB in the future. The government is very difficult to find new financing, and you have to fight to the others, all diseases in the public health system. So civil society help us a lot, work with the national parliamentary to create laws and to improve the tuberculosis budget to help us to implement these new tools and for social protection, for other things beyond health that the population needs. I think it's that. We think together we can TB. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Doctor. Very interesting, and we really hope you'll put a deadline, set a deadline for improving your communication with civil society at country level. So, because you have a good partner inside there, so they can a lot help you in promoting and scaling up the access to BPAL and shorter treatment regimens besides BPAL. Thank you. We'll go with our questions to Dr. Njeka. We know that and we do recognize and acknowledge that South Africa is one of the leaders, and it was the first to implement the operational, the clinical research regarding all shorter treatment regimen, BPAL including. So can you please share with us the challenges that you face since the approval of the new guidelines this year in 2023, and can you imagine and have a deadline or a target, let's say, when you expect that patients with TB-resistant form will have access at the programmatic level for shorter treatment regimen, including BPAL and BPAL-M in South Africa? Thank you.
All right. No, thank you so much for inviting us to contribute to this important discussion. You're right. We started with a BPAL clinical access program 3 years ago in 4 provinces, 5 sites, and we closed that access program in August this year. We had to prolong the access program by a year because we're struggling to scale up BPAL for all the eligible patients. We had wanted to do last year because when we came up with our TB recovery plan last year, we were hoping that we will have everyone be given access by September 2023. Unfortunately, we suffered a few challenges. Number one, the Ministerial National Essential Medicine List Committee did not finish the review. We decided to do a development, do the great methodology for adoption of the regimen in the country. That delayed. But also we suffered the effect that the laminate has not been used enough. We got funds from Global Fund office in the country to buy a lot of the laminate, and the usage has not been great. So we're now arguing, is Pretomanate really going to be used? Is this and that? More so that we've seen that the incidence of TB is declining, the number of MDR TB patients declining. So we started to have a bit of overstock of bedaquiline on our shelves, and so all those things made it very difficult. But in March this year, we went through the committee. We got a green light. We had ordered Pretomanate, which we received 3 months later. I think it came in around July, August or so. So on the 1st of September, we then started to scale up bedaquiline. So now we're scaling up BPAL-L, right? It's a different version, BPAL with levofloxacin, not moxifloxacin, because after a long debate with the committee that reviewed the evidence, they felt like, yes, BPAL can be used, BPAL-M is okay, but there is nothing in the literature which indicate that levo is inferior to moxi, and because we have a lot of issues with QT elongations and all that. So it's probably better to go with levofloxacin. So we started 1st of September in Eastern Cape at one of our facilities. And so first month, we scaled up at the facilities that contributed at the access program. Month 2, we targeted 50% of all facilities in the country. And now we trying to carry on and make sure that by end of December this year, all eligible people in the country are being given the BPAL-L, which is very good. So what we're doing is really every week we develop a dashboard and we send the result to each province to say this is what has happened during the week. So what is very important for me at national level is to calculate the proportion of eligible patients that received BPAL-L, because we're also doing training. We trained last year, but there's need for more training. So now the rollout is depending on new training and all that. Everyone has received Pretomanid and all the drugs. So 7 out of 9 provinces have started. Several facilities are receiving the drugs. We have an average of 450 people who start MDR-TB patients per month in South Africa. So since we started, we've covered, over the last month, we covered 212 patients. So our aim is to make sure that when we move to the next year, every eligible patient should be receiving BIPAL-L. So that's where we are now. Thank you.
Thank you for the answers. Just before giving the word to Priyanka, I would like to put a kind of red line for all of our panelists. We've spoken a lot about eligible patients. I think the first thing in the country that should be done is actually to come back and to see how many of the patients in your country are considered eligible. Is it 80%? Is it 70%? Because figures matters a lot. So we need to have a target. We need to have a red line to see how many patients are eligible and whether this is implemented properly in the country. As well, we spoke a lot about the access program. I think this access program should turn into programmatic programming, and we need to change a bit the approach and to find and to look for all options in the country to ensure that all our estimated eligible patients are on the proper treatment, because that's an option that every patient should be given in the country. And I think civil society can play an important role there. We have the important role and stakeholder of private-public mix, which should be taken into consideration, which plays and influences the access of treatment regimens in the country. And not to forget about the DST capacity in the country mentioned by the doctor, because this is the start of implementing the BIPAL and the shorter treatment regimens. This should be available in the country before the regimen is there. So I think it's absolutely crucial. Every word that has been spoken by every one of you is important. So, and as to finalize, I'll give the word to Priyanka, and you are to be with the key messages thinking. Thank you.
Thank you, Oksana. So I see Stephanie is saying something to me, which is to move on. Oh, we are at time. Okay. Yes, absolutely. Okay. So thank you so much for all your kind words. I will request you to just stay on with us for a moment, but I'm going to give the mic back to Mitchell to take us through the next section. Thank you.
Thank you, and don't move, please. And don't any of you move yet. I am conscious that our friends focused on diagnostics and vaccines are drinking a glass of wine for you, but we'll join them momentarily. I want to just add to how you just ended it, that each of your words really highlighted how critical the collaborations and partnerships are. And I do want to, we have a couple of questions that have come in. I also want to invite anybody to come to the microphone here in the room. I know it's been a long day, but I know there are lots of questions. And so while anyone is thinking about coming to the microphone, I might just go to you, Priyanka, because you were introduced and started about the timing of things. You know, many of us know quite well that just a few months ago, the world gathered in New York, not only for the high-level meeting on TB, but also for pandemic preparedness, prevention, and response, and for universal health coverage. And I wonder if you might just reflect for a moment about how to connect all of that. And as a Global Fund Advocate Network representative, how do we bring those pieces together to take what the 5 panelists have said so that we do the right thing? And what do we need to do going forward from New York and from Paris?
That's a heavy question. And I think there can't be a possibly simple answer to your question, but I will try to answer as much as I can. I would say that at the end of the day, where the action happens, where the substance is at the country level. What we need to look at is not a one-size-fits-all approach. Every country is different, every community is different. Yes, we need equitable access to all people, but how we approach this access, how we look at our plans, our strategies, need to be tailored to the communities that we are working with, and they can only and only be tailored to the communities that we are working with when we are taking them in the stride. So if there has to be a next step forward, and we need to make sure that the UNHLM targets are met, and we are ensuring that the people who need BPAL and BPAL-M are receiving the treatment, we need to design our strategies with the communities. So that would be my answer.
Priyanka, you said that it was a hard question, but you made that answer so perfect. Thank you. I'm so glad I asked you and put you on the spot. Anyone else care to come to the microphone, please? Yes. And I'd ask you to introduce yourself, please.
My name is Erlina Burhan from Jakarta, Indonesia. So as mentioned by Dr. Tarmizi earlier, that Indonesia has finished the BPAL operational research, and we started the regimen to be given as a programmatic in many hospitals. But I think I have to also mention to you that, well, Dr. Nadia was very polite, but I'm not a polite clinician. So due to the very disappointed of not being able to give BPAL to my patient since BPAL-M also since early September, because we do not have Pretomanid in the country. I've been calling my NTP manager so many times that in my hospital, Persahabatan Hospital, we have 2 and until 4 patients a day that need to be given BPAL and BPAL-M, but we couldn't. But they said that they already procured to GDF, but up until now we do not have the Pretomanid yet. So please, the global society here, the public health society, have asked, I don't know whether GDF or the pharmacy that not giving away the drug. So please help. So the story is not that good as what is mentioned in this.
Thank you so much for raising it. And if the story were all good, we wouldn't be here. And I'm so glad you named that, because we need to be here until we resolve each and every one of these issues. I don't know, Sandeep, if you want to pick up on that. Oh.
Alina, thank you for flagging that, and we are aware of some supply issues continuing. We knew they were going to get solved by September, October, but looks like they are not. And one of the initiatives, keeping that in mind, especially in countries, larger countries like Indonesia, we are doing is trying to stitch together collaborations locally so that the drug can be available locally. So we are working closely with Viatris, the pharmaceutical manufacturer, to make it available locally in Indonesia, so that Indonesia can get it directly from the manufacturer and supply to the program directly. That will be much faster.
I contact the local pharmacy in Indonesia about this Pretomanid, and they said they have it, but the country cannot buy because the price is higher than GDF. And I said, why? It's the same drug. And I said, because the pharmacy sell to them higher than selling to the GDF.
Okay.
So that is very ironic that Indonesia cannot buy Pretomanid from the Indonesian local company.
Okay. No, thanks for flagging that. It should not be significantly higher. It should be only higher to the extent of their costs of importing it. So we'll definitely look into that and close that loop with you. So, but thank you for flagging it.
Great, and thank you, Sandeep. And really, it's important that we don't leave this room and think that everything is done and dusted. There's an enormous amount of work in keeping the lines of communication open so that we can identify those problems and figure out, I'm an advocate, and very often it's easy to yell at the donor First, you yell at a donor because they have the money. Then you yell at the government because they have the power. And then you yell at anyone else that will listen. And one of the most important things we can do as a stakeholder association and as a global community is to make sure we know who to yell at. And making sure that, and sometimes it can be government and advocates and clinicians working together to move governments, to move funders, to move product developers, to move the importer. So I'm so glad you raised it, and I think I can say that the TB Alliance, I can see Sandeep on his phone already. These are issues that the quicker they get flagged, the quicker they can get addressed. He's addressing it right now. But thank you, truly. Any other questions or comments? It actually is really such an important one to end on, actually. And you may think that's odd, ending on one that doesn't have a clear resolution. That's the nature of TB. It's the nature of global health. It's the nature of translating science into people's lives. And there aren't any easy answers oftentimes. And that's frustrating. And that's what public health is all about. How do we take the information we have and try to at least incrementally, and I think each one of you going down there, oh, Norbert, sorry, please.
Yeah, no, I just
My peripheral vision is terrible.
Thank you. No, I just wanted to say something about the access. I think this is a critical issue. Last year, when I approached Global Fund, when they said there are funds for us to buy Pretomanid, I had requested that we buy enough to treat 6,000 patients. Because from literature, from conferences, it was clear around March, April last year that there would be a huge demand towards the end of the year. And I tried by all means to get an order before Christmas from South Africa. But because of these differences with GDF, with the bureaucracy, despite the fact that we had money, I had 3 documents approved by the Director General for Health of South Africa to buy in April last year, and then July, and then September. But because of this other bureaucracy, there was a delay. And I told my colleagues when they came back from Christmas in January, I said to them, because we missed to issue that order last year, you will see we're going to have a problem. We've allowed everyone to order the drugs, and we issued our order around February, March this year, and we received in September. I think the bureaucracy should also be open-minded, you know, because as programs, I mean, why should we all wait to order after the World TB Day or close to the World TB Day 2023? We knew from last year. We've been asking for these drugs last year. The committees were working on it. The people with the monies know the prices, 1, 2, 3. And the last postponement happened when the global price reduced. That week we're going to issue an order. They said, no, but this is expensive. So because of wanting to save maybe a few dollars, some of our patients are going without drugs. It's very painful. We want advocacy. We want a strong civil society. But we also need to make sure drugs reach people. Yep. Drug must reach people. So with Pretomanid, we should order bigger quantities to use. It is so painful, but we lucky we fought and we got at least not 6,000, but I think 4,000 people. And again, I've been telling my guys that if we don't issue another order before Christmas, it's going to be a problem next year because you might feel, this is what I've been saying. So please, we need to spread this thing. Let's not go for Christmas without ordering more because we order too late and then there's a crisis in supply and then we complain down the line. So I thought I should just share this. Thank you.
I'm so glad you did. And you know, Priyanka, you started today by saying this needed to be not a conversation, but a call to action. That's the call to action. By Christmas, place orders if you can. And if you receive those orders, you know, make them happen. And I love when a government official says, let's make the bureaucracy work for the patients. That is the critical call to action. Please, one more.
My name is Maarten van Kleef, but I don't know, do I compromise with the wine or can I continue with questions?
Please give a quick question.
Okay, because
very quick.
I said a quick question. So tomorrow there will be new drugs available. One day treatment for latent TB, gene expert that took, it is now, that was discovered, it came in 2010, we are now 2023, etc. So my question is, what are the main lessons to take home, let's say the top 2 or 3, for implementation something new? What can we learn from the BPAL implementation?
Beautiful question. I'm going to not let you do 2 or 3 each, but if anyone has a sentence or 2 about what do we need to do to answer that last question. Lessons for implementation. Anyone? Please.
I think inside the Brazil, we learn a lot about implementation new technologies, not just now with Pertomanid, but when we work with bedaquiline, we start trying to include the bedaquiline inside our public health system in 2014, but the drug is just available in 2001. So it's almost 10 years trying to have the medicine, and because of the bureaucracy, because of difficulty inside the country, it was very, very difficult in the beginning. But now I think the government work better with researcher, with civil society. It's easier to include in the public health system new technologies, not just medicines, but new exams. And if you save money, it's better and better, because Pertomanid, we will save like 70% of our budget. So country have to think about that. With the regular treatment, we use like 18 months of treatment. Now we just need 3 drugs for 6 or 9 months. So when you save money, then you can use this budget to improve the diagnosis, because it's a very challenging, to improve social protection. It's best for all the people, not just for the government. So thank you.
Saving monies and saving lives. I love it. One more. Oh, Norbert, well, let me go for you, and then we'll do Norbert.
All right, Maya, you go ahead, please.
Okay, it's a few words. How did we manage to approve the new standard so quickly? Because in Ukraine we have it yet. With standard, we started developing the new TB standard immediately after WHO published the rapid communication in May 2022. So the new standard, which is based on the most recent WHO recommendation, was approved only 1 month after the WHO updated its DRTB treatment guidelines. So we just need to hard work and very quickly. That's all.
Beautiful. It can be done, and coming from you means so much. Please, sir.
Martin has raised a very important question, and my response is that we need to have a comprehensive delivery package in place, right from the laboratory to the delivery. Only then, if something new comes, we can follow it on. Like, it cannot be a piecemeal approach. It has to be a comprehensive package. So we need to have everything in place and then add something to it.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I think what I've learned is that our systems are wired to do one thing at a time. You start with research, then you get all the evidence, maybe 10 years or more, and then you start a process of getting maybe a regimen approved, couple of years, and then after that to talk to the pharmaceutical people to go for a tender. So it takes forever. That's why it's not working, because there's so much to do, so many priorities. I think we need to be doing a lot of things at the same time. If I see that this is promising, I start talking to my farmer guys to say, if it becomes available, what are we going to do? You know, and then you work. I mean, we started talking to the tender guys when the evaluation of BPAL was happening, and they refused to talk to me until the evaluation took long. Then they listened to me, and then they got the drugs on tender a week before the evaluation was approved. Then they got more moxifloxacin and less levo. Then the resolution was go with levo. I went back to them and said, look, let's use what are we going to do? They say, look, it's not a problem. You can use Moxie as well if you run short of Levo, but we try and reverse the quantification. That's easy to fix because you talk to the pharmaceutical, but if you do everything at a time, you do 20 years, you never finish anything. You must do several steps at the same time and see how you move with that. Thank you.
Shap, beautifully said. Please.
Okay, lastly, I think every new drugs is very important for the patient, but the challenges is always in country and the availability of the new drugs because of the new drugs. It must be belong a pharmacist that cannot be shared to everybody. So I think this is the most important things, that if we have found a new drugs, how this new drug can be accessed to all the country. Because in terms of the implementation, the national program already learned how to taking step forward for the implementation. But to access the drugs, I think the issue that we have to come out really how the country access without what we call it, the patent of the drug itself.
Thank you so much, all of you. Those were incredibly wise words from all of you. And I know we're over time, but we're pretty much right on schedule, more or less. And we're going to draw this evening to a close. I do hope everyone will go upstairs, and when we finish, the elevators up to the lobby level to the terrace, and these conversations can continue. And I just want to highlight what was so fantastic was to see the consistency. And I think Priyanka said how context matters, but at the same time, some of those lessons are so clear and so cross-cutting about political leadership, about community leadership, and about making sure to go faster, that we break what actually has been a consistent part of global health, and that is to think sequentially. And I heard from a number of you, we've got to break the sequential thinking. The quicker we move to parallel processing, thinking about delivery and product development and procurement and implementation science and programming at scale at the same time, we will do better. And as I always say to folks who say, oh, we can't do that because we don't yet have the guidelines or we don't yet have the product approval, is what's the worst case of planning in advance? So you have the plan and it gets kicked down the road a month or two. But if you don't have the plan and you get the guideline or you get the regulatory approval, you will wait years to get going with the other pieces of the puzzle. So really moving out of this room, thinking in parallel of all the pieces that need to happen. And finally, I want to just end by the essential need to think about this not only about TB, and I say this as someone who works in HIV and TB and other areas of global health, that nothing I heard today, and I am no expert in TB, nothing I heard today was unique to TB. Everything I heard had resonance for how we failed as a global community about pandemics, how we have not provided health systems to provide universal health coverage, how we have failed to deliver on the science of HIV and on the science of TB. And I don't want you to leave this room cynical about that. The upside to this is really thinking about how we translate scientific options. Now, I studied English literature, so I don't know anything about science. I do know about English literature. Options, the biomedical options that science creates are what science creates. They become choices for providers and, most importantly, for patients when we do the much harder work of engaging in the policies and the programs and the procurements to make that possible. So yes, we need to develop more options, and you saw that in Mel's great slides. Discover and develop options, deliver choices so that we can have impact. So with that, I hope we can do it in TB and really show the global health community that it can be done. As you told us from Ukraine, it can be done. Thank you all again. Elevators up to the ground floor and to the terrace, and thank you all for being part of this. Thank you.